as a leader, you're the CEO of the company, you think you know the answers to that, and you probably have some really good opinions, but you really need to ask others for theirs to get feedback on it for that buy-in. If nothing else, just to, they may absolutely come up with the answer that you already knew. But me saying it to you, if you're the CEO and I'm the department leader, and me telling you this and you agreeing and you saying, hey, what do you think of this? It just brings me in to want to be a part of this.
Hey everybody, Chris G here, Hard Hat CEO, and welcome back another Thursday. And today we're going to talk about some technology when it comes to construction, which is one of the faster growing segments. And to help me do that, I've got Cesar Viana Teague here, all the way from, I think it's California.
Yeah,
right?
I am. Yeah, I mean,
I think it's that background that really gives it away. Is that the Golden Gate Bridge?
That's the Golden Gate Bridge.
Yes, yep. I've seen it once. It was pretty neat. So that being said, Cesar, give us a little information about yourself, if you would.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. So, based here in San Francisco. Been here since '78. Went to school here, undergrad, grad, and then Chicago for postgrad. But yeah, my background was basically in sales and marketing, and I actually back in the '80s worked summers in construction to make ends meet. I did mostly roofing, but I did all kinds of various projects. And one day I actually painted a kitchen. I didn't open the windows and I got sick from inhaling all the fumes. So I've never forgotten that. So I moved into training and facilitation space. I've been doing that for 18 years. In the last 12 years, been doing more enablement and change management, just helping companies with really just how do we get our arms around this change. And like you said, construction tech, fast growing, health tech, there's certain industries that have a lot of software coming out and people aren't used to using that. I'm doing a project right now with a major utility company, and they're consolidating different things into one system, and it's not easy because you're used to doing things a certain way. So my job is to help smoothen that process out and make the transition into change a little smoother, because people don't like to change, mostly. Unless they understand what the heck's in it for me, and how am I going to balance this with my current day job, and am I going to still have a job after we put this new AI tool in place, whatever it might be. So that's kind of like what I do.
Is one of the biggest obstacles, make sure you got top down encouragement or buy-in, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You got to have it, and change for the sake of change is not any fun sometimes, but sometimes if you're communicating to the people why it's important, what's in it, like you said, in it for them, or what's the benefits to help them incorporate it, I think that's very important, or probably one of the most important things, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it has to come from leadership. And this, by the way, assumes that the people trust the leadership. And because if they don't trust the leadership, then whatever's coming down from the top will not be respected or necessarily implemented, or people may drag their feet in wanting to implement it because if they don't think it's that important or urgent, and they don't trust and respect where it's coming from, then that will create an issue, which is also part of my work, to help the leaders with their messaging, with their communication around that. So it has to come from the sponsor, which is the top level, and then go down from there. But you can't just be a command and control top down. Okay, here folks, here's what we're going to do. We're putting this new construction tech AI function or whatever software into place, and go make it happen. It can't work that way. There has to be a lot more transparency, communication, and collaboration along the way for people to accept it, because we're all adults. We all, we want to make sure that our work is viewed as valuable, but we also want to have a voice in the work that we're doing, and we have to enable people to have a voice in formulating the strategy and the communication plan and the training around that's going to go around it, because most change management these days seems to be just about training on the new tool. That's not change management, that's training. That's important, but that's like later on down the road. You've got some work to do in the front end before people are going to accept it on the back end.
Now, we're going to talk about, I know there's different steps and you have your own process, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But I've done some change management, I guess, in the past, and I assume it's still the same. The communication part, is it better to start with a small group with everybody being a representative of, say, their department or their people, and then kind of get the buy-in from that, and then almost kind of consider them the influencers or the kind of the leaders within their group? That I always talk about grapevine. It's always, a grapevine can be good or bad as long as you feed feed the grapevine with the right information. So
you have to have the right fertilizer.
Yeah. So is that kind of how one of the first steps, you almost got to create that small committee, quote unquote?
Yeah. So you have your, champions, your influencers, your change agents, just different names, nomenclatures you can call them, but they're all essentially the same thing that you can have, because then their voice is being heard. And certainly if usually the line leaders, the frontline leaders, the department heads are the ones that are actually even more respected than maybe somebody at the top who made, no offense to CEOs, but I think the average tenure of a CEO, I think, is less than 4 years or something. Well, certainly in the technology industry, it might even be less. It's probably maybe longer in construction because it's a more stable industry, right? Less turnover. So, but for the most part,
my CEOs are usually the business owners. So the ones
so
we're trying to,
they're there for a while. So they're not coming and going and just managing something. But the point is that they tend to respect the line leaders. So to your point, where we're going to be listening to those folks. So we want to make sure to get their buy-in and their voice and feedback as to the strategy for the change that the strategy as to why we're doing this, the strategy is what's our communication strategy around it. And part of that is taking a step back and doing some strategic planning on it, which is what that model that I came up with, is the A.P.E.E.E. model, does to help, the leaders with that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. So what's A.P.E.E.E.? And it says multiple E's. Nobody can see that but me. What's that mean? Or break it down for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's analyze and assess is I'll just mention what each one is, and then I'll really quickly explain it. You have the first A, it's analyze and assess, plan, execute, evaluate, and exit or evolve. And so, heck does that mean? So it's like before you start anything, we need to understand where are we? And it's just like, I think it was Einstein who said that if you've got a problem to solve, you want to spend 90% of your time on the problem, understanding the problem, and then 10% on actually solving it, just to make sure you're solving the right problem, right? And so the analysis and assessment piece is helping to do that. We're analyzing a situation, we're doing a little SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. We're doing some stakeholder interviews, the department heads that you mentioned. We're interviewing with them to understand what's going on. Where are we aligned? Where are the gaps? And then we're assessing the priorities given all that, and what's the readiness for this organization to actually change. And then coming up with the why, the who, what, when, where, why, and how, clarifying all of that during the analysis and assessment phase. That now informs the next step, which is the planning. Planning is what's your objective, strategies, and tactics. So what you learned earlier on is going to inform your plan, because what happens when you fail to plan. And so once we identify our strategies and tactics, and this is where that buy-in that you talked about of getting the line leaders and everybody on board to determine what is our strategy and objective, strategy, and tactics. Are we all aligned here? Are we literally rowing in the right direction? Okay, and then now with that, you actually execute on your strategies and your tactics, and then you evaluate on a monthly and quarterly basis. And then at the end of it, you do a little exit surveys and get some feedback as to, okay, what did we learn here? What did we do well? And what should we be doing differently next time? So that's what the A.P.E.E.E. model is. And usually in the beginning phase is when we're choosing which actual change model, because there's a few models like the ADCAR model, the Cotter model, and McKinsey model that you can use
Mm-hmm.
for doing the actual change piece. And so that's when you can determine which one of these just makes sense for me to do, given the complexity of my project and the scope of my project.
Now, as a CEO or business owner, um,
Hmm.
to make change, you got to decide what your outcome wants to be, right? What kind of goal or what situation, what's our intention here of making this, in some ways, upsetting process, because
It
uh,
is.
that's what the management comes in, because we don't want to, we know people are going to be not like it, but we want to manage it. We want to make it as smooth as possible, but
Yes.
we have to have an outcome that we want to achieve. So is that the very first step? Is that
Hmm.
the top needs to decide what they want and then make a decision on, okay, some changes have to be made to get there.
Yeah, and you've probably seen some of those videos from Start with Why. So
Mm-hmm.
Simon Sinek did that in his TED Talk, and it's not new, but he really popularized that to
Right.
millions of views. But it is indeed start with the why. Why are we doing this? I mean, our companies talk about innovation. Great. But what they don't talk about is that in order to innovate, you got to take some risks. In order to take risks, there's going to be some failures. But if your culture is that if somebody fails, they're going to be reprimanded, they're going to be shouted, whatever it is, they're not going to want to take risks. Therefore, it's going to be very difficult to innovate. So you really have to start with a why as to, why are we doing this? What's the outcomes that we're seeking? To your point about objectives, which we mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we have to be clear on the whole initiative to begin with. And that's where those conversations come in with the leadership team and saying, all right, we're implementing this new software, this new construction technology, because it's going to make us more both efficient and effective. You could be very efficient going 100 miles an hour towards the airport, but totally ineffective because you're going the wrong direction. So you have to be both efficient and effective in terms of that whole reason why you're doing this, and then communicate it transparently and frequently at various stages of cadence of communication, so people know what the heck's going on and they don't feel left out or in the dark, or why are we doing this, because then that starts raising some questions in the back of your mind, and you don't want that.
When I consult for other business owners, most people just want to know why. And if you can answer that why, and they might not always agree with how you're going to get there, but they want to know what the purpose is. And they're just curious. And in that fact, they just, all right, well, why are we doing this? What's the benefit? And I won't say benefits always have, but they just, lack of a better term, some people are nosy. And I don't mean negative nosy, but it's just they want it. They have this curiosity. They want to, like an itch, they want to scratch it. And as long as they understand, or at least you can convey that to them, and it doesn't have to be used. Going back to that grapevine thing, if somebody's explaining it to them, it's even better when somebody else explains it to them. That way, they know that they got the buy-in too. So,
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. And then the explanation can come from one of the peers, like I was saying earlier, about they trust and that they respect, because maybe they don't trust
yeah,
folks at the top. Just nothing against them. They just don't. They're just not necessarily 100% aligned, and they'd rather hear it from their direct manager or supervisor than somebody from the top that they're
yep.
not as engaged with on a day-to-day basis. They just don't have that relationship. So it has to happen in both channels. I'm not saying one, it has to happen at both levels.
As a business owner, I have a tendency to be impatient. What's a ample amount of time? And I'm sure based on I guess the change, but what's
Mhm.
a fair average amount of time that you would implement, say, A.P.E.E.E. as well? I mean, we're
Yeah, it
talking.
depends. It's a good question. It really depends on the scope of the and complexity of the
Mhm.
project. But usually any change is takes some time. So you're talking minimum 90 days.
Okay.
Heck, it takes a couple of weeks just to get on somebody's calendar. So, and so if you figure if you're going to do stakeholder interviews, you're going to talk with people, you're going to get feedback, and just do this, have these meetings. It takes time, and then you're implementing, and then you're getting making some adjustments along the way, because what you said earlier, you're doing little pilots, you're testing things, maybe in a department where let's see if this works here, then we'll roll it out. course, depends. If you only have 50 people, then a pilot may not make sense.
Sure.
If you have 10,000 people or more, then yes, that would make sense. Um, but yeah, so you're doing that a little bit at a time and adjusting as you go along.
Now, not change can be a lot of different things, but today we're talking a little about technology. How do you cope with the ones that don't deal well with technology? You got an influencer or a person, a leader in the group. I'll pick on my dad. If my dad was working, he's not the most tech savvy, but that's just part of it. How do you deal with that type of change when people? I wouldn't say he'd be open to it, but he wouldn't be. I mean, he wouldn't fight it necessarily, but he might not be as catch on as quickly as others. Put it that way.
Well, that's fine because you've probably seen that technology change curve that looks like it's a bell curve where you have the early adopters, you have the general adopters in the middle, then you got the laggards off to the right. That happens in just about anything. I mean, a new cell phone comes out and you've got people lining up on literally camped out in front of an Apple store, whatever it is, to get it, and then you have folks like me. Over 60 that are then well, you know what? I'm going to wait till it actually starts proving itself, and that's okay.
Let's get the bugs worked out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to tolerate the bugs initially. So, but even then, I'm okay using my current, version 10 instead of. I don't need the 11 right now. It's okay. So, but yeah, there you're going to have those folks, and so but as long as they understand the why, they're not going to be fighting it. The idea is you don't want folks to be fighting it because you didn't communicate clearly the why or what. Back to what we were talking about earlier, as to around the reason for the initiative and for this change. Now, to help the folks to get up to speed, yeah, you have different levels of learning, and certainly as adults, adult learning is more about hands-on training, right? We learn more by on-the-job training, and that's one of the industries. Construction and the utility industries is certainly up there when it comes to what you need in terms of more on-the-job training versus like a web-based. You just go online, you kind of like look at the material, and you're not really using the tools to play with it or anything. No, you have to do a combination of things, and it has to be the training itself has to be done properly so that people can get up to speed fairly quickly. People learn at different levels. Some people are more, they want to hear something, listen to it. Some people want to read it. They want to see the technical documentation, right? And people prefer the video over that. But if you did all three, plus some practical exercises, then you're going to have a much faster way of getting up to speed with something, whatever it is that you're learning. Even just driving, you can't learn that, looking at the books or looking at videos. You got to actually do it at the same time, but you still need to have some fundamentals and foundations before you start getting in there. So you mean I got to, press the accelerator, the clutch, and I stick shift and get my hand on the wheel, and I got to drive too? Can you imagine? Now we do this all automatically if you are indeed doing stick shift. So, but in the beginning, it took a number of years. I was 16 years old when I started fooling with this, right? And it took a while to really get a hang of the rhythm. And it's part of the training is to build that rhythm to help people get up to speed so that it becomes like second nature.
For contractors or construction business owners and technology and willing to make that change, what's your opinion of what's the biggest bang for their buck when it takes technology wise? Is it like estimating? Is it sales? Do you have a thought about that?
Yeah, I think it depends on, I think the technology that you want to bring in, my only thought around it is that you want to bring in the technology based on where you are in terms of your business. Each business has their own SWOT. So this is where that analysis and assessment piece comes in to understand, okay, is it the sales that we're kind of lagging behind a bit? We're really good at the estimating, or is it the other way around? So then it just depends. The technology you bring in should be able to, support and augment where you have shortfalls. Because you're trying to innovate, you're trying to improve, you're trying to grow your business, you have to find out where are the gaps. Objectively speaking, have somebody come in, take a look where are the gaps that we have, and see, okay, what is it potentially that we could, what are our current strengths, and what can we be doing differently? And so that's where the technology that they use would be based on what you could be doing differently. Now, if there's some technologies that exist that could do, obviously, usually there are, can do more than two or three things, that
Sure.
would be ideal. It's just a question of what's your current environment? Like, is your office used to more Microsoft kind of like, work because you already
Hmm.
have certain technologies in that software around it, or are you using Salesforce or whatever it might be, then the technology you actually choose should be aligned with what the folks are already used to using to really minimize the impact of that change.
Do you have any before and after stories? Like I walked
Oh,
in and
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, there's a few, but I think the one that really hit me the most, because
hmm
you talked about the department leaders and getting them involved, and so the one that hit me the most actually happened with somebody I know last summer. I can't mention any names, but
sure.
the company was, had invested, six figure, over 100K into the initial phases of an ERP system, enterprise resource planning system.
Hmm.
ERP is arguably the most complex software that you can implement. Take the
Okay.
longest, right? Biggest scope. And what was found out was that the department heads were not included in the conversation. And so what happened is like a month later, they realized they were deep into the season. There was only like a few months left until, Christmas,
Right.
which is a busy season, and nobody wants to be implementing some new thing during a busy season.
No.
And they said, no, we just not good timing for us. And so the whole project got put on hold. So you will have project derailments. You can even have project abandonment. And so that whole project is literally on hold as we speak because
And
of
it
that
and it
geopolitics.
wasn't really an argument. I mean, it wasn't. They had a legitimate purpose, reason. It wasn't like they
Yeah,
were revolting. It's just like this is not a good time to do this big of a change or implement this big of a project in your busiest season of the year.
yeah.
And maybe we ought to wait till whenever and do it then.
Correct. And that's part of an analyze and assess piece. Part of that is your stakeholder interviews and your change readiness. As a company, where are we in terms of the change readiness piece? What's the impact going to be? As a leader, the CEO of the company, you think you know the answers to that, and you probably have some really good opinions, but you really need to ask others for theirs to get feedback on it for that buy-in. If nothing else, just to, they may absolutely come up with the answer that you already knew. But me saying it to you, if you're the CEO and I'm the department leader, and me telling you this and you agreeing and you saying, hey, what do you think of this? Just, it just brings me in to want to be a part of this
Sure.
more than if you just told me, go and make it happen.
Has there, well, I guess this is a good, I mean, it's perfect. I'm going to ask, have you ever had anybody influence the answer? And I guess in this case they did. It's like, listen, you don't want to do this right now.
No.
Push this off.
Yep.
And somebody listened and said, okay, yeah, you're right. Now I'm sure they recognize their mistake for future that they'll bring other people in place.
Well, there
Um,
was more than one. There was like three or four department heads that said
wow.
no.
No.
Said no, 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 not right now. It's not good timing, or it's not that like you said, we're not revolting about this. We're not. It's just more that it's just we can't do this and be
Right.
able to do our normal workload that happens to be the busy quarter of the year. In the whole year.
Sure.
Don't implement this right now. Implement it in January, maybe in Q1, or
Yeah.
certainly in the first half of the new year would make total sense. But they
Can
didn't
you give
ask.
me how about a success story where somebody's done it right that, where they implemented it and how do you, I'll see my success. How do you measure success in this particular example?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I mean, the operation was a success, but the patient died. We don't want that, right?
No.
And so I think that we talked about what are people used to using. So one of the projects I worked on was they were trying to determine what CRM system, which is another second, could be complicated, just really depends. What CRM system do we want to use here? What are people typically that's customer facing? Sales uses it, marketing uses it, customer service. You see, you had a couple of departments using this. So which one are we going to use? So we talked about, we mentioned about, understanding the readiness. Where are people now? And so we did that to understand what are they used to using. And it was a toss up between Microsoft Dynamic 365 or the Salesforce CRM system. Both are good. Price wise, there is a bit of a difference, I think maybe Salesforce is a little bit more, although they've been really trying to come down a little harder as far as being more competitive.
Be competitive,
yeah, and making it available to small business owners. Even they have actually a small business tool available currently. So, but the idea is the company was already using some part of Microsoft. They were used to the interfaces, and so just overall, it made a total sense to implement their Dynamic 365 CRM for the company. And so that was implemented in collaboration with the 5 division heads of sales, the director of IT, right, and the director of finance and operations, bringing them together to understand and being on the calls, by the way, on both demo calls to understand, and then taking a step back, analyze and assessing, okay, here's what we've heard, here's what we know, here's what we don't know so far. But I think pretty much people were aligned with it. And so the success there was that it was the right decision to implement the 365 versus the Salesforce.
I mean, you could argue if you put them side by side that probably Salesforce has a stronger system, whereas Microsoft 365 is more general. But in this case, it's more the simplicity is the answer instead of complicated things. Yeah, adoption.
So your second question was, how do you measure success?
Yeah.
And that's the answer right there. It's like, how many people are using it? Is this a giant paperweight, or are people actually using this so we can generate dashboards and reports just like that easily?
Sure.
Can people in the field using this versus taking notes? They're using a tablet so that we're able to respond to customers much faster, or not having to wait till we come back to the office to enter our notes when we get to our desk. Then we forget half the it's so that this is where the adoption comes in terms of the success, and that's what the obviously the evaluation and exit evolution piece comes in the A.P.E.E.E. model to understand, are we evaluating, okay, what's are people doing adopting it? If not, what do we need to be doing differently here to change things up here for the next month, so that we can make some adjustments right along the way. And then, like I said, at the end, determining, what did we learn from this, so the next time we do something around here, what do we need to do better or differently, as it were.
Sure. So as we wrap up, I would ask, what would be the first thing, what kind of questions they need to ask themselves, being the CEOs, business owners, of making a decision to make a change?
Yeah.
Before you bring it in, are they looking at return on investment? They're looking at, like you said, calling somebody and evaluate the gaps. What would be the first step for them to make a good decision?
There's a lot of questions, but I mean, you still need to understand, you need to think about, why are we making this change? How ready are we to make this happen? Is the timing right? There's no simple answer.
So that's fine. And
you have to analyze and assess this to see if this even makes sense to do, and if it does, when. Back to the story I mentioned about the time, it could have been perfect, but the timing was wrong.
In podcasts, they teach you to ask open-ended questions, so it's a big one. But
it is.
I want to summarize what I think you said, or I know you said that. You've heard the terminology management by walking around. And I think the first thing would be to go and start talking to people, have that conversation.
Yeah.
And just ask, like, hey, where are we starting? Because your people will know, and they're not totally ignorant when it comes to technology. They're going to know some things out there. They might even know more things than you do about what's out there. especially if you're sending them out to different trade shows, associations, or stuff like that. They're going to know what's available. They're going to have an opinion. So start going out there and talking to your people first before you make any rash decision and
Yep.
disrupt everybody. So
Absolutely.
is that fair enough?
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. I think that was well said. That you really need to do that to make sure you're all aligned and you have all your information versus, and that's as ego could also play a part in
Oh,
not
heck
doing
yes.
that, right? So, I mean, we're CEO, we're all founders, and so it's like we didn't get to where we are by
No.
it's entrepreneurial, but there's ego there. So just the question is, how can I introduce a little bit of humility into the equation here so that I can start asking people questions?
Well, your team helped you get where you're at right now. So use them to further
Yeah.
you along. Put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you.
Cesar, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Through, let's say, LinkedIn or
Yeah,
website or something?
LinkedIn's great. Cesar Viana Teague, LinkedIn, and welcome to connect and message me there, or my website. Yes, changeisgood.io.
And that information will be located in the show notes below. Also, my link, if you want a free consultation on how to get out of that hard hat and become the CEO of your company, get with me and we'll have that conversation. Cesar, we thank you very much. It's been a pleasure today.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
God be with you till we meet again, guys, and see you again next week.